The most important scene in The Departed is very easy to miss. Frank Costello, played by Jack Nicholson, has a quiet little heart-to-heart with Billy Costigan, played by Leonardo Dicaprio. Frank is the boss of the Irish Mafia, and he's recently taken Billy under his wing as new muscle, and he's grooming him to become a part of his inner circle. But before this relationship can get too far, Frank takes Billy out to lunch, and he urges him to get out of the crime life while he still can. He makes this request out of respect for Billy's late father, who despised Frank and everything he represented. But Frank respected that in his own way, because deep down he knew that Billy's father was better than him. Because Billy Sr. was a man who could not be bought, and he was capable of great violence, but he rejected the life of power. He lived a quiet, humble life, working hard jobs, even though he was connected to Frank Costello. He was, in short, a man who could become Frank Costello, but who chose not to. And that was a rare quality indeed. And that was the reason why Frank Costello gave Billy Costigan Jr. the chance to leave his organization before he was in too deep. Frank was paying his respects to the memory of Billy's father. And I don't think we can fully come to grips with the gravity behind this gesture until we compare it to the way that Frank Costello treats another major character in the movie named Colin Sullivan, played by Matt Damon. Colin Sullivan is a rat who has infiltrated the Massachusetts State Police as a ranking officer, but secretly he feeds information back to Frank Costello's criminal organization. And Frank has groomed him since childhood to play precisely this role. Colin's parents were not in the picture when he was a child. He was raised by his grandmother, and Frank took advantage of this vulnerability and posed as a kind of substitute father figure. He promised Colin status and superiority and a sense of belonging if he worked for Frank. He told him a story about their Irish heritage, how they came from rags at the turn of the 20th century, and how they slowly took control of the streets until they finally put John F. Kennedy into the Oval Office. Frank Costello made Colin believe that he too could be a part of that story. He too could take control of America by infiltrating the state police, and he would make his adoptive father proud. And Colin bought into this story because it made him feel big to win Frank's respect and his love. But as a matter of fact, Colin was acting under a delusion from the very beginning. Frank did not respect Colin. He did not see him as a son, because he knew that Colin was a man who could be bought. Frank had been buying Colin since he was a child with all of his promises of money and status and power. And that made Colin different from Billy Costigan's father, who was a man that Frank could actually respect because he did not respond to that sort of motivation. And that was the reason why Frank would beg Billy to leave his organization while he still can, while at the same time he would trap Colin within it with false promises of respect and belonging. Frank was begging Billy to prove that he was like his father, that he was a man who could not be bought. And the irony of that situation is that Billy really was like his father, and he proved this precisely by staying on as a member of Frank's crew. And that's because Billy was actually a rat. He worked for the state police as an undercover cop, and he was infiltrating Frank's organization with the intention of betraying him. And he was willing to sacrifice everything in order to put Frank in the can. And so Billy really was making his father proud in a way that Colin could only ever dream of when he cuddled up to Frank Costello, because Billy was a man that Frank could not buy.